Beautiful Bangalore afternoon light is here, and I'm really enjoying this afternoon. It's been a rainy day, but really lovely light at 4 p.m. So, thank you for to the attendees. I can see a whole bunch of you now coming in. Thank you for coming in at this slightly earlier time. We normally do it a little later in the evening, so don't blame me for it. There are other people on this panel you can shoot at for that. But thank you for making it. I am really, really delighted to see so many old faces, so many familiar faces coming back for every session. My name is Anirban Bhattacharya, and I've been hosting this kind of what started off as an impromptu webinar now for the 10th session. And it's been a blast. We're having a lot of fun every Friday, talking to leaders, talking to CXOs who share their lives, stories, anecdotes, all kinds of stuff. And today I have a very special panel. Two of my favorite people. I know both of them rather well. And I say this as my favorite people because I've actually only worked with my favorite people over the last 9 sessions. So, but these are two guys that I've known differently, personally as well. And I'm absolutely in awe of the work they do, because while we've had great leaders sharing some amazing insights and anecdotes and ideas in the past and their inspirations in the past, here are two guys who are really, in my opinion, doing a lot to change the world we live in. And I can't tell you how happy I am to have Mekin, Maheshwari, and Royston Braganza today. And thank you for coming. Thank you for taking time. I know that Fridays are busy, and you guys are always busy, and that you could take time out at this time on Friday. And I know you have to rush off somewhere after this, but I'm delighted to have you. So
thank you.
So the typical way that we go about it, we'll stick to our pattern, I would say, which is we start by a quick intro that I do for everyone. And then it is over to my panelists to talk and about their companies, their lives, etc. A couple of minutes. Then it's a 3-way conversation, which I'm just the placeholder. I keep the conversation together. And then the best part starts is when we probably open up for the last 25, 30, 35 minutes is only Q&A. And considering the fantastic quality of audience I always get, be prepared for some extremely intelligent and insightful questions that will make you think. So I'm really looking forward to that. So that's the plan. So this is, I have been told, I repeat, this is webinar hygiene that I need to tell you who I am. So for those who are joining in for the first time, my name is Anirban, and I am the host today, as well as I run these two companies. I am ancient. I've been doing this for a long time, 15 odd years of leadership development for one of my companies called The Painted Sky, where we've done a lot of stuff using art. And in 2017, we opened what at that point in time was Asia's only, now it remains India's only school for design thinking, human-centered design. And Mekin Maheshwari has actually been one of my students. He went through one of the batches, and his team has been in and out of my classrooms many times. I love working with those people. Amazing energy, amazing commitment to changing the world. And so that's what we do. That's about me. And I don't want to spend any more time about me. But now moving on to my guests. So I'll just take a couple of minutes, although a couple of minutes is probably not enough to describe these two folks I have. This is the second forum where, I mean, while these are leaders that I have, they're not really the typical corporate guys that I work with. We had Akshay Soni and Nritya Madappa also from a different profile in one of my earlier sessions. So let me tell you a little bit about Mekin. Mekin and I know each other for a couple of years now. And Mekin leads something called the Udhyam Learning Foundation. Udhyam Learning Foundation is a very straightforward objective in life. It wants to change the way we study and the way I think grassroots level entrepreneurship runs. Mekin does not have small goals. His goals have always been very audacious, and he really wants to disrupt the world as we know it. And for someone of my vintage, that's very scary. But he wants to do it, and he's doing it beautifully. I think he was the first chief of technology at Flipkart, and after that, he went on to become the first head of HR and the first CPO at Flipkart. And after that, he went on to found Udhyam. Udhyam also, as some of you would know, has been I would say, the anchor partner with the Delhi government to introduce the spectacular entrepreneurial mindset curriculum at the Delhi government schools. which just got launched last year. So it's, I think, still early days. But knowing Mekin's passion and knowing those guys in the Delhi government who are running it, it's going to be an absolute blockbuster. It will change the way India looks at education and entrepreneurship going forward. Mekin also runs, he's a co-founder at GAME, the Global Alliance for Mass Entrepreneurship, where they again have a very humble goal of just about what 50 million, creating 50 million jobs by 2030 through mass entrepreneurship. I work with Mekin a fair bit. He's been my design thinking client. I work with this team. I mentor a whole bunch of their team members, and they're amazing people to work with. And I also work with Game now, and they're just another amazing story developing in the way they're trying to change the way India lives and works. So welcome, Mekin. I'm very excited to have you today. Okay.
Thank you so much, Anirban.
Your time to talk is coming. Hold on, you're not on yet. All right, with him is Royston Braganza. Okay, now I had a tough time fitting Royston's introduction in one slide, I must tell you, okay, because it's not that he has given me a long one, but it's very difficult to leave out stuff what he has given me. So in a nutshell, Royston Braganza leads Grameen Capital Limited in India. It's what we know as the Grameen Bank family. I mean, Grameen family, Grameen Bank being the flagship, founded by Professor Mohammed Yunus. And he's been the leader of this entire organization since the last 13 years, ever since it was set up in India. I know Royston more personally, and he's an amazing friend to have. And we have shared many chicken ghee roasts in coast to coast on Church Street. But beyond that, Royston Braganza is, again, an amazing leader to have in the social, I would say, entrepreneurship and enablement spaces, where he is pushing hard to create micro entrepreneurs in India through the microfinance channel that he leads at Grameen Capital. Also, he's the only panelist I've had who has addressed the United Nations General Assembly. So I cannot speak enough of that. I think when he starts speaking, you would know that he probably knocked the socks out of them as well out there. So he's done a lot of stuff. He continues to do a lot of stuff in India. He has been voted as one of Asia's top CEOs in 2013 by Finance Monthly out of London. And the second best CEO for India that year, I am told the guy who beat him is a gentleman called Kumar Mangalam Birla. So that's Royston Braganza for you. And I'm delighted to have Royston here today. It's taken 2 months of planning to get his time to get him on this panel.
Take 2 months to go through this introduction if you don't embarrass me anymore.
Well, I don't undersell my guests for sure. So let's get with that. Yeah. All right. So very quickly, I'm done with this portion. So what do we do? Again, for those who know this panel, they know that this is the background of our conversation. This is where we started talking about what does leadership look like in this absolutely disrupted world. That Vision 2020 is turning into a horror story, and what are leaders doing to keep employees engaged, businesses committed, stakeholder values in front, and go forward with that. While that was the original conversation, I think we have moved a lot since then. And as I go off this slide deck and focus on my panelists, I think today's conversation would again be more in line of how are these gentlemen, my panelists, leading the organizations they're leading? How are they dealing with this disruption? Their plans, future, vision, ideas, inspirations, and these are people who are driving very inspiring organizations. So that's all I would say now. Over to Royston. Royston, tell us in a few minutes about the work Grameen Capital is doing in India and beyond, and your role, and how have you been experiencing the last few months and the way ahead?
Sure. I mean, thank you for having us here, and it's a pleasure. And coming after that introduction, it's always embarrassing to decide, how does one talk about it. But I often, use a simpler form of explaining what I do. I keep saying that my journey has been coming down the corporate ladder, while everyone like Mekin and you, Anirban, have been going up. So it started in corporate bank and investment banking. For about a decade in Citibank, then mid-market, running Citi's mid-market business, set up HSBC's SME, then microfinance, set up HSBC's global microfinance, and then hit rock bottom with Grameen. So it's been the race to the bottom in a sense. So it's been quite an exciting journey, as you can imagine, and it's been 13 years since we started Grameen Capital in India, and the journey was just off the back of Professor Yunus winning the Nobel Peace Prize. Grameen was trying to understand what would be the best approach to operate in India. Two obvious ones were, let's look at microfinance, let's create a microfinance company. And then we'll have a God discussion another time, but providentially, I was identified for this role, and one of the first things that I said probably broke their heart, because I realized three things. One was there were 400 million people less than $2 a day, which was the global poverty benchmark. Second, there were about 120 odd microfinance entities, all NGOs at that time, who were already doing this. Many of them had gone across the border to Bangladesh, learned the model, trying to replicate this on their own, and some of them doing a fairly good job. And finally, the bank licensing situation in India was not the most optimal for Grameen to get a bank license off the bat. And therefore, we said, rather than create Grameen as an entity here who's doing the micro lending, is there a way to leverage off our brand, leverage off our networks globally, and help these 120 to scale up? So rather than seeing them as competitors or as me too's or someone who's sort of taken our model and done something with it, and we need to take it back and build that ownership and reestablish, our primacy on that point, was can we create an entity that actually helps these 120, because there's a greater shot at reaching 400 million people with more partners than less, and definitely if we want to do it quicker rather than later. And therefore, we created what we call Grameen Capital India as the world's first social investment bank, because we realized that the single largest constraint for them to grow was to access capital. Whatever they raised, they broke into small tickets and then lent to many people. So the more they could raise, the more they could service, and in that sense, being able to broad base their fundraising capabilities. And they were not experts in that. They were simple, honest people wanting to serve the excluded populations. So we created a unique investment bank, what a Goldman Sachs or Credit Suisse or JP Morgan would do for large corporates. We started doing it for people serving the poor and helping them to scale. And I'll just end this first sort of segment with an example, which is, Bandhan today, which serves about 8 to 10 million clients, was an NGO when we started working with them. So NGO to for-profit to NBFC, NBFC to bank. And we did the same with Ujjivan, Janalakshmi, Disha. 2 years ago, when I sort of finished my term as the chair of the Indian Microfinance Network, we had 52 million clients. So across our partners, who had 9 of them become mainstream small finance banks. We worked with Raghuram Rajan to create the policy for the MFI small finance banks. And to that extent, therefore, creating the whole new ecosystem for financial inclusion. So really, to the point of disruption, Vision 2020, or the way we look at a problem, and that's what Professor Yunus challenges us always, is to look at a social problem with a business solution, and then create a scaled model that can solve that problem. So being able to reach, and if you take 50 million clients on an average with 5 members in a household, then immediately you're talking 200 million people. So that's the scale that probably would have been impossible if we did our own Grameen lending company in India and did it all ourselves. It may have taken much longer. It may have never happened. But today we can sit back and say, this is the journey that we've traversed on the financial inclusion side. And we've been able to replicate this across affordable health, affordable education, clean energy, water, sanitation. So over the last 2 years, our focus has moved from traditional microfinance to what we call the broader impact agenda. And we can talk more about that after we hear Mekin.
Wow. I mean, when I'm listening to you, I'm thinking, am I listening to Royston or Mekin? Because that Mekin throws at us all the time. Thank you so much, Royston. Humbling and beautiful to hear that. Mekin, over to you. The same story. Tell us a little bit more about Udhyam and Game. And of course, I have a further question to you. I know you'll start with something similar with your Flipkart story and then this. you're also somebody who from a tech role in Flipkart moved to an HR role in Flipkart. That's by itself also very rare to see.
Mm.
And so, and then of course the entire Udhyam journey. So
Yeah.
tell us more. Would look forward to hearing this.
Yeah. So I think it might be easier to understand me if you knew that I had to go to 7 schools to finish 12 years of education. No, I wasn't thrown out of any of them. uh, this was primarily dad getting transferred and staying in places like Jaipur, Kashmir, Calcutta, or outskirts of Calcutta, Jamshedpur, back. Um, right. So as a result, I generally think of life as maybe a series of adventures, a series of journeys to be taken. So actually, for me, between technology and HR, like these are just interesting journeys. I also love exploring and learning. So learner and problem solver are probably the the closest identities that I'm happy to get associated with. So I like for me getting into HR never felt like as in how dare you get into a territory that's reserved for people who come out of TIS or from XLRI. I thought of it as fairly simple problem solving uh, in terms of what should people expect, right, and what should we expect of people, and how can people work together, etc. So I think that what seems awkward to people, and then I go into details of explaining why, which I'll avoid on this panel. Uh, but like getting into education over the last 3.5 years, for example, has been delightful. And when I was getting in, I learned from meeting a lot of people and reading a lot that this is an ossified space. It's 200 years old. Things don't change, right? And before the panel started, we were talking about how there's already been what I can say radical change that's happened in Delhi. And on the back of that, as a proof of concept, there is Assam, there's Maharashtra, there's Kerala, there are multiple other states that are looking to do similar things. Yeah. So I I feel that we as a world are where we are because so far that's what we questioned. Um, your slide about leadership and disruption evoked a thought which I'll share. And maybe it's a, I don't know if we can give panelists or audience 20 seconds to respond on the chat. Um, because the thought is about a mythological character. Right? So when I say the name of this character, what is the first word that comes to your mind? And if you could just put that on the chat, that'll just help drive the conversation.
Sure.
Arjun. Right?
Arjun.
The Arjun from Mahabharata. Right?
What's the first thing? Okay, I'm getting. Please read the chat. Okay.
Focus.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay.
Skilled, focused, principled, precision. Yeah, we remember the story of him hitting the fish's eye, the bird's eye, very skilled. I now read Dharma and confused, right? And I think the story or the piece that I want to remind people of is he's the guy when the largest war of probably the millennia is about to start. He's like, hey, I don't know if I can do this, right? Takes his charioteer right to the middle and then asks the question, is this right? Right? Is this possibly right? And that question leads to the Bhagavad Gita being narrated, right? And it's bizarre how that is not the first, that's not the first thought that we think of when we think of Arjun, right? Like this is a guy who was ready to stop the war, right? Get in the middle of the war and say that, hey, maybe this war shouldn't happen. And that's not what we think, because in that moment, what Arjun did, and what I at least now relate to as leadership, is he questioned. So I've now started to relate to leadership as questioning. So not about having the power, that can you do it? But hey, even if you have the power, should you do it? And I think just this piece of questioning of, hey, why do we have 12 grades? Or why do we have history, civics? And we have to remember when Babur invaded the country. And that somehow is going to determine who gets a job and who doesn't. I feel like starting from questioning is a good start for figuring out what already exists and what might be ways in which it could be disrupted.
Okay. So tell me more about Udhyam. Now let's get into That's a nice way of putting it, the philosophy behind the journey. Now let's talk about the journey, Udhyam and then game, of course.
Yeah. So Udhyam start with a very simple premise, right? That if learners could do things of their own choice in the real world, what might it look like, right? And if learners, a simple gamified version of that was students running their own businesses with 5 to 10,000 rupees of loan provided by Udhyam in a school-like environment, but the businesses ran outside in the real world. With the intention that, hey, if you can return the principal, please do. If you can't, that's all right. Profits are yours. This is your business. This is your money. The first few pilots went amazingly well. And that led to me forming this as a nonprofit. And given the scale ka keeda has been infected with my first job at Yahoo, thinking about scale and hence working closely with the government came fairly naturally. I still believe, having been a technologist, I still believe that technology is far from getting to a point to inspire us into action. As a result, education, which is an active process, technology can only play a peripheral role currently. It's great for entertainment, it's great for communication, but inspiration, I'm not convinced yet, not just yet. So even though I'm a technologist, my path to scale right now was government. So working with governments in Delhi was a great break where Mr. Manish Sisodia reached out. And that reach out happened thanks to a meeting in your office, Anirban.
Did I love we spent chatting over this? Yes.
We had, I think, 4 hours spent in your office that led to that conversation, which then led to us working closely with the Delhi government. And at least what the government folks tell us is that they hadn't seen curriculum development like we did it, or like we helped them do it. So for the techies out there, we did test-driven development, which is, hey, every piece of the curriculum had to be tested in an all-boys school, in an all-girls school, in a co-ed school, on a certain set of parameters. And if it passed those parameters, it would go in. Curriculum so far in the country and mostly in the world is written by experts. Experts who just know and they decide what kids are supposed to study. And we tried to flip that around and we did pilots. And well, last July is when it launched. And I think the one piece of data that I have, you're right, it's too early, but there was a third-party evaluation which found that 86% of the kids want it every day. So we've hit the ball out of the park for these kids. Right? And I think that's what I'm most proud of. Teachers is a whole different struggle, which let's not spend time on this panel about. Right? Maybe we can talk about that a little later. So we were able to convince Delhi government to give students 1,000 rupees each for trying something entrepreneurial. So Delhi government's budgeted 1,000 rupees each for 11th and 12th standard students. We've had about nearly 2,000 entrepreneurs come into classrooms of Delhi schools and interact with over 6 lakh students, not giving them gyan, but 5 minutes of them sharing their story and 35 minutes of students asking them questions. If you think about it, right, all of this, right, 9th to 12th standard students have entrepreneurship mindset curriculum as the first period every day, which is as important as math gets, like as much time as math gets. If you'd asked me 3 years back that this is possible in education, based on everyone I'd met, I would have said, hell no, this is impossible. Right? But this is happening, like government giving 1,000 rupees to children to try something entrepreneurial, no questions asked. First period is spent on topics like self-awareness, grit, persistence, critical thinking. So I believe change is possible. I believe disruption is possible. The world around us, like change has been accelerating. and it's only about really trying to figure out how human beings move, how human beings operate, and design for them. And I think this could work. So that's on the back of Delhi. Now Assam government's done something even larger. Kerala, Maharashtra, Haryana, in their ITIs want the same curriculum. Haryana is already live. Kerala is going live. So I feel it's a matter of 3 or 4 years before the whole country has youth experiencing at least one entrepreneurial experience before they get to life. I think that's what Udhyam does. There's a smaller 30% of what we do, which is enabling small business entrepreneurs.
Right.
And there our fabled success story has been to move ironing folks to move from coal to LPG. And that's like a picture perfect case study for design thinking. So, which is like, it's silly how ironing folks still use coal, and being able to help them move to LPG. We did try solar before you jump, but solar just doesn't create the intensity that you need, which is why you still don't have solar in your kitchens. And similarly, we had this with solar, and now about almost 1,000 entrepreneurs use this 10,000 rupee device, and this is scaling now on its own. So yeah, that's it.
I know that last story well because I think it landed up somewhere with us, and we got interviewed for that also, because I remember this whole it was part of some design thinking conversation we had. I think fantastic to see your ability to discover the real problems to solve and then going about solving it in a very structured manner. I mean, it is brilliant. And I think that entire prototype driven thinking that also leads to a better curriculum design. It is design thinking in action. So thank you so much. We will come back on this point because I think that's where there will be a lot of connection between what Royston's doing and saying and what you will be talking about. Let me turn this to Royston. I love the way this has started because typically we don't land on success stories so early. So Royston, because we are on a happy mood, tell us something more about the microfinance journey. And I know you talked about Udhyam and a whole bunch of small finance companies that are now banking entities that have developed out of this. So what is the real impact you're seeing on the people that this is enabling? And what have you learned from this journey in the last 13 years that you would like to take forward from here?
So one of the motivations for us is always to see the end client and what they do with their lives. And for us, that's been quite fascinating to see, the level of women's empowerment in the panchayats, the number of women who are now becoming sarpanches, the quality of, the engagement of women in the decision making at the local village level. So these are really, really interesting to see how microfinance has been able to transform that set. And from microfinance, the other energy of the Grameen family has been behind social businesses, which is, as I mentioned earlier, picking a social problem and creating a business solution. The first problem, of course, was financial exclusion. The business was microfinance. And then, Professor Yunus turned his attention to, especially in Bangladesh, of malnourishment. And, how do we look at areas of undernourishment, getting, the equivalent of what we have as a midday meal scheme there is all private, all public solutions, government solutions. And at that time, Danone was looking at, supporting some of the work of Grameen. They said, we want to give €1 million. Can you do something? And Grameen being Grameen said, we don't want the money. And they kept insisting, no, please take this €1 million. We want to give it out, whatever project. And Professor Yunus said, no, we don't need the money. We don't want the money. And this sort of drama kept playing out till he said, we can start a company. And if you put that as equity and we join up and create a Grameen Danone, and we can create yogurt and the famous Mishti Dohi, which is famous from where you come, Anirban, is equally famous on the other side with our, Bangladeshi cousins there. And therefore, we said, can we create it in such a way that even if a girl has one bowl of yogurt in a week, it gives her all the nutrients she needs for that week. So highly fortified. And with that, Grameen Danone was created. So the women who were microfinance borrowers who had used their loans to buy a cow or a goat or a buffalo, then sold part of their milk, and that was put into a plant run by Grameen Denon. So a whole movement started around creating a business model around the problem of malnourishment. And then there was the problem of the swampy land and cracks in the feet and people walking bare feet and worms going through that and residing in the stomach. So how do we get them to wear footwear? And that's when Adidas came in and said, we want to create something with Grameen. And that's how Grameen Adidas started. And Professor Yunus was clear, but it has to be a $1 shoe. And they're like, yeah, we'll help you, but $1 is impossible. And he said, no, that's great, but then we won't do it. But we still remain friends. And they were, no, we want to create a Grameen Adidas. And he said, then it's $1 shoe. And so this, from being, this is harebrained, it's not going to happen, to let's fly in the best R&D team, the design team from Germany, sat in Bangladesh, designed this, which then finally looked like a floater. I was in Berlin to see the prototype a few years ago. But so every single social problem, and then he did Grameen Veolia for drinking water, where arsenic is in the water, and then Grameen Auto and Grameen BASF. And I think the whole journey, therefore, I'm fascinated with what Mekin is doing and Manish is doing in the schools in Delhi, saying how do we create an entrepreneurial ecosystem? How do we create, and probably Singapore has it, well taped up, but it's a small country and a sandbox approach to entrepreneurship and innovation. But how do we really bring that mainstream? And there are no dearth of problems in India. I mean, I was just reading a line which says that there are decades when nothing happens, and there are weeks in which decades happen. And we are in those weeks right now. So, we are living those crazy, life-changing, world-changing weeks. So enormous opportunities, whether it is in the music space, and we're seeing what Carlton's doing, which we were talking about before the call, going online, or the education space, or the food delivery space, or the medical and healthcare space. It is just an enormous opportunity that's opening up. We were in some conversations yesterday, again, with some global technology interventionists who are looking at the social problems, and our estimates about 500 million people will fall below the poverty line because of the last 4 months. So that's type of staggering impact, because it's taken us decades to be able to pull 500 million people out of poverty, and now within few weeks, 500 million people are going back into poverty. SDG goals, which were to be met by 2030, are now likely to not be met or be pushed back. So the whole need for energy behind innovation, behind technology solutions, for doing what we've always done, probably in a different fashion, is opening up before us through this pandemic. So while your question was around microfinance, I think more than microfinance is what are the insights of the learnings that can be pulled from that and operated and applied to different social problems that can create just significant opportunity for those who are doing it, but also economic growth and livelihoods and a new economic order. Capitalism, sort of over the last 10 years, has shown us that it's not all great. And, we all celebrated the fall of the Berlin Wall and celebrated the fall of communism. But probably it's time for us to think of a new economic order.
Well, thank you for pointing that out. I think, yes, we have been talking about the end of neoliberal movements around the world and what we are seeing as a result of that. So what I'm loving from hearing both of you is that, we are plagued by this gloom and doom conversations all around. I think one of the things I keep talking with my team, I keep saying is that we will not talk of COVID. We will just not. But it's very difficult to avoid it. And it's good to hear coronavirus, COVID, etc., all the time coming up as a driver for innovation. I think I'm loving that. So I think while Royston finds his camera again, Mekin, let me turn this question to you. I think this is important because Royston is talking access to finance. And my limited work with your other entity, GAME, one of the key drivers is, of course, access to finance, Global Alliance for Mass Entrepreneurship, developing local entrepreneurs, grassroots level entrepreneurs. So how do you see this challenge being met Now that we are talking of the economy going into a nosedive, we're talking about the crunch, people falling below the poverty line, more 500 million people, etc. And we're also talking about access to funding to run entrepreneurship. This looks like a kind of a dichotomy, looks like a kind of a conflict. How would you deal with that, or how would you address that?
Yeah, I think in terms of if you view entrepreneurship, that's something that happens when the soil is right, the climate is right, everything is perfect. I think from that lens, I see your dichotomy. Right. In my view, though, entrepreneurship actually happens when the need is the most.
Absolutely.
Right. When the challenges are the largest. Right. Like the reason Israel is one of the most entrepreneurial countries in the world is not necessarily because of the ecosystem, or because just how nurturing the ecosystem is, but more like how challenging the ecosystem and life and strife that some of the people there have just grown up with. So I think that's first. That one is like Royston was saying, that hey, this necessity is going to lead to a lot more people to start thinking. Like when you don't have a job, then you are no longer comparing that, hey, should I be in a job or should I be starting something? Right? The first option's closed, and that's happened for a large number of people. Most entrepreneurs that game refers to are actually necessity entrepreneurs. Mm-hmm. People who are running a business because that's how they will make their livelihood. How do you get them to now start thinking about, okay, now that you've started this, how might you grow? Mm-hmm. Right. And this takes me back to this whole idea of human capital, right? That if you were to wait for capital, for other forms of capital to evolve, and only then be able to start, I think this is going to be a big challenge. Am I saying that, hey, India is going to see a lot more entrepreneurs and games mission just got easier? Hell no. Of course, finance is needed. Like without access to cheap finance, for those on the panel, like a typical subsidy seller, and Royston obviously knows this, pays about 10% interest per day. Right. So that's 3,650% interest annually.
Whoa.
Right. That's the interest rate that your subsidy wala pays, and he doesn't pay that interest after he does the sale. He pays that interest as a reduction from the principal. He doesn't even get that money. Right? He's already paid. He's taken a loan of 1,000 rupees. 900 is the worth that he gets, and then he repays back that 900. So, is access to cheap capital or cheaper capital than 3,650% important? Yes. Right. But is that only, or is that alone going to solve people starting to be entrepreneurial? I don't think so. I think it is necessary but not sufficient condition. Mm-hmm. There are multiple other things that need to come in play. Right? There is role modeling that needs to happen. India continues to live in a place where the sense of dignity of labor, or our class system of white collar versus blue collar, English speaking, non-English speaking, determines your self-worth, right? And forget everyone else, how you value yourself. So the number of small business entrepreneurs who want their kids to do what they are doing is so small that I do not see small business as an aspiration for young people.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think till that starts happening, right? So that to me is another key driver. Like so many people in Eastern Europe are happy to start a small business.
Yes.
And hey, the life aspiration is, I will run a small shop. I will run a small cafe. Right? In India, except for the extreme elite at the top, where running a boutique store has become fashionable, nowhere is it fashionable to run a small business. It's looked down at. Right? You don't think of them as entrepreneurs. So I feel we need a lot more. Finance is a piece. We need media and storytelling. The stories that we learn growing up, don't necessarily talk about people being able to create value through difficulty or solving problems for others. So I think games challenge fairly widespread, but finance is a key part of it. So is ease of doing business. Like, so what are the things that the environment can enable? Like India has about 59,000 laws that apply to a small business entrepreneur, right? The number of such rules and regulations, and there is about close to 3,600 of them, which can get you a criminal offense, right? You will be jailed for not doing very, very simple things. So decriminalizing, simplifying a whole bunch of these laws would help in at least an inspector not being able to blackmail you into doing stuff. Right. So there is a whole lot of that needs to happen, but there is still this piece about role modeling and us switching our lens. Like we as regular people, right? When we see an entrepreneur, whether it's a sabzi wala, a retailer, somebody who's running a small shop, do we view that guy as an entrepreneur? And like, what does that do to us? Just switching of that lens, in my opinion, could help that guy have higher self-esteem and think about growing his business. So yeah, I feel this is a complex societal challenge.
Okay, so you're saying that essentially access to finance is just one of the things. And I know, because my limited conversations with you as well as the folks at Game has been about making it aspirational, that most people probably look at entrepreneurship at a certain socio-economic level as the last resort. And how do you change that story? I think that's a very important consideration. So let me ask you this question. Actually, this would be my last two questions to the panelists, and then we'll open it up to Q&A. So folks, the chat lines are open, the Q&A lines are open. I've got about 3-4 questions already, but others, please feel free to ask. We will have an extended Q&A session coming up right after this. So back to you, Mekin. And this is a question I think a lot of people here would love to know. When you move from Flipkart and
Can I interject, Anirban, just on his earlier point?
Yes, of course. So sorry.
So, can you hear me clearly? Also, just want to make sure, because I've put my earphones on. It's pouring rain and it's like amazing outside the window, but it's too noisy.
You're loud and clear. We can't hear the rain, unfortunately.
Okay. We'll get that at the end of the. But I think the point you made about aspirational and making entrepreneurship aspirational, the way the current situation is, I think we need to position it as making it existential, because with people losing their jobs, with the type of retrenchment, income reductions, people's salary cuts, and I mean, there are about our estimate is about 20 to 30 million people or migrants would have gone back, if not more, and about 30-40% of those may take time coming back, and 20% may never come back. So to that extent, you're already hit in rural India with a double whammy. You have people who would traditionally be supporting the village economy by remittances from the cities. That has stopped, and they are now dependent on that infrastructure locally to survive. Now, can we flip that on its head and create an entrepreneurial solution where you say, we create the infrastructure, or for you in the village itself, you don't need to go back to the city, even if it means digging a farm pond. This is the monsoon. Let's fix and kill 6 birds with one stone. You get rainwater, you get irrigation water, you get 130% IRR from a farm pond, you get a NREGA credit, you get the whole opportunity, therefore, to be able to look at an existential problem, being solved by an entrepreneurial opportunity. So how do we create experts like you in design and implementation to be able to communicate this opportunity to people who are currently, looking helpless and hopeless and thinking the world is sort of caving in on them? And probably it is, in a sense, if you thought that I'm going to go back to my old job, and if that job shuts, the world is caved in on me, creating an option for them. But sorry to interrupt, I just wanted to sort of create that paradigm.
No, I think that's a great point. Again, I think that's the big one. So let me ask you this question, therefore. So what's the way ahead? How do you see
No, that was not the intent. Please ask it to Mekin.
Eventually, don't worry. But since you brought that up, so I think
Yeah.
that, and I'm going to get to Q&A right after this, is to understand then what do you see as an outcome of this? I mean, we are not here doing any crystal ball gazing because nobody has a clue as to what next looks like. So therefore, talking of future would be ridiculous. But what do you see as a possible fallout of this when people do realize that this is the reality now that we'll have to live with? How does it hit your business as well as entrepreneurship, micro entrepreneurship? And I will ask you, and then I'll take the same question to Mekin.
So I think being an optimist, eternal optimist, there are just only one way to look at this as a huge opportunity. Any other way, and it's not that it's the only way to look at it, but any other way would be defeatist and would say that everything's falling apart. I think at every level, whether it's students, whether it's middle age, whether it is the elderly, there are economic opportunities to be able to look at the current problem. And the simple dimension I want to talk about is just the SDGs or the Sustainable Development Goals. The global benchmark for that number is the need for $30 trillion of investment. So whether you look at goal 6, which is water and sanitation, or 7, which is clean energy, or 3, which is healthcare, or 2, which is food security, each of these needs a significant amount of investment. 10 trillion probably is my estimate that India needs out of the 30 trillion that is needed globally, because of the just sheer size of our numbers and indicators on those 17 goals. For that, there is already global commitments in terms of finance. And so to Mekin's point, finance is just one out of those pieces. But if one is well aligned and sort of aware of the ecosystem, then finance is not the issue. It's about designing what the sector needs. It's about creating what solves for the problems that are there at hand, and then building or plugging into people that could support. So to my mind, I talked about farm ponds, and that is something that is so intuitive, or a food delivery system. I mean, if people are stuck at home and running out of job, or their salary are being reduced, can they then start a home catering business and deliver food in the nearby community or in the neighborhood? Or can they do online tuitions for those who are unable to figure out what's happening in their classes because they're all online?
Right.
Or seamstresses, or whatever it is. I mean, the ability for us to go back to a model that is entrepreneurial, that's small entrepreneurial, and the Mittelstand in Germany was a great example. The whole thing was built on small businesses and on apprenticeship. Yeah. We seem to have not picked up on either of those, and we think that we are sort of reinventing our own slice of bread. But the reality is that, are there pieces of this puzzle that can be fixed with an entrepreneurial solution? Is this and I know in my other webinars, I penalize people who use the word unprecedented or new normal because I'm sick of it. But I'm not talking about an unprecedented problem. I'm talking about, is it an unprecedented opportunity that is suddenly available, which is saying, irrespective of the segment. And I'm not talking about big solutions. And I think that's where Mekin and I are on the same page. Small solutions, small enterprises that are making a difference. The money will follow, and it's not social enterprise means you have to put a jhola and you have one meal a day. I mean 7.8 time book value multiples is what SKS got. I mean, not that it's good or bad, but just a statement of fact. Those were the type of multiples, multi-bagger returns, mainstream private equity. Sequoia put in millions of dollars. We did OG1 round with Sequoia. So it's just knowing that you're in a niche that no one else has thought of, that you're able to service it, that you're doing everything that you would normally do in a business, but it has a social outcome, and therefore there is a double bottom line. So I'll pause there, but I think we just need to educate our young people about social entrepreneurship as much as regular entrepreneurship.
Okay. Mekin, I would have asked you this question, but beautiful questions are coming in. And in the interest of time, I'm going to actually turn this around and now go straight into the Q&A. Thank you so much for asking the questions. I would love to have someone ask Mekin Maheshwari the first question, and because it is over to Mekin. So Biren, let me open this up with you. I kind of do this every time. So Biren, your question to Mekin if you have one.
I have to be very, very well prepared for you, Anirban. I have a question for each of them, not knowing which direction you'll take me in. The question that I don't ask will be the better one, so I'll leave it there.
Right.
Okay. Mekin, thank you very much, and just hats off to the amazing work that you're doing, and every little bit counts to make what we want to see in India. So the transformation of India will only be possible when we skill India and teach people how to fish, right? All the stimulus packages that I've heard of people asking the government, please give me some fish, right? And these handouts are one side of it. But I think what all of us need to do is to see how we can get the government to just allow industries to leave more money on the table with entrepreneurs and the private sector that can come up with their own initiatives, particularly in the field of education. And so I was really fascinated by the thought leadership that you provided and how you're changing the curriculum when it comes to entrepreneurship. But I think this is required everywhere, right? So is it possible for us to clone you or to clone your model, starting, I think, from preschool? Because, that's where both parents and kids today, just do the cookie cutter thing of the past. And my daughter is an educator in that field, and she's run away from it for the moment, at least, because she just is so fed up at the way that the whole system starts to rot from there. And I think, if you can show the way as to how you allow people like in the Ministry of Education and places that people hate to go to or are frustrated going to, that can help to create this new paradigm, that'll be fantastic. And people like us who work in organizations, we always struggle over what's the best way to spend our CSR budget. So is it possible to direct some of this money towards, enabling, scaling, and developing the stuff that you've done? And I know that you want to be Arjun and focus on putting the arrow in one little corner, but is it possible to digital W? Maybe we can do that in animation.
No, Biren, you're too kind. I think this panel clearly has probably portrayed me larger than I am or what I have done. But that said, to your first question, Delhi government 2 days back created a committee for rethinking curriculum from nursery to 8th grade and invited me to be part of that committee.
Fantastic.
So is it possible to make this across education? I feel so. And it was great to have the education minister, Manish, talk about that. Hey, why do we have age-based classes? And there is no real good answer, right? That why can't it be capability-led? Why can't it be group-led and interest-led, etc.? So I think we're getting to a point where a lot of fundamentals are getting questioned. A lot of startups, and I think of the current Delhi government as a startup, starting to question status quo in a lot of areas and hopefully create new paradigms or new normals that can help others follow. So I think that's definitely happening. It will probably take some time. These things take some time, but I feel what has happened with Udhyam in 3 years itself feels magical. I wouldn't have expected us to be working in 6 states in 3 years, with a couple of states having like statewide rollouts. So to your other question, that hey, while I believe in focus, I also believe in scale. That कीड़ा I got Yahoo as first job, Flipkart as second job. मतलब scale नहीं किया तो कुछ नहीं किया. मतलब I can't look myself in the mirror kinds. I would otherwise be much happier running a small school in the Nilgiri somewhere. But unfortunately, that scale कीड़ा is there. So we are actually working now across states, and we're happy to converse about like what are other ways in which it could be scaled. There are some of us who are doing it, but we know that one organization cannot do this. So we've open sourced our curriculums. We partner with others. In Delhi, we brought in 7 other organizations to build this along with us. We're doing the same in Assam. So I think from a spirit point of view, we are very aligned to trying to spread what we are doing and make it a lot more set of people doing this, and would love to. And yes, I'm fundraising, so thank you for the offer. But let's talk.
Thank you very much. Thank
Thank
you.
you so much. Thank you, Biren.
Thanks.
As always. I'm now opening this off to Anshuman. Anshuman, you have a question for Royston. Anshuman Awasthi was our participant, was our panelist last week. He heads innovation and technology for Mercedes-Benz here. Mercedes-Benz R&D. So Anshuman, over to you.
Thank you, Anirban, and thank you very much, Mekin and Royston, for very interesting conversation. And to me, it's personally motivating to see what you guys are doing. Amazing work. Keep up. Question to Royston, and it's pretty interesting from my point of view, because the current banking system, and I think it's all over the same, favors to those who can borrow easily, not those who really need it. And Grameen Capital is an initiative that is doing exactly opposite of that. So how scalable is this initiative, Royston? And question here is, I think Mekin will be interested in the scale. So how could the capital to those who have good intentions to use it, and you can provide that? Is there an offensive policy level offensive that is happening with the government of India, or?
Thank you for that, Anshuman. Thanks for those kind words as well. And absolutely agree with both what you and Mekin are saying, that scale is absolutely critical. As I mentioned, and as you rightly pointed out, Grameen sort of turned the entire banking norm on its head. So what was needed was exactly what was opposite of what the bank was designed for. Traditional banks needed collateral, needed someone to introduce them, needed a credit history, needed a track record. And Grameen said, if you have any of these, you're not our target market. So we don't need collateral, we don't need banking history, we don't need someone to refer you, we don't need any of the things that traditionally you would have needed, and we will give you the money. So the whole model is built on the poor are not dishonest any more than you or me. There is no integrity issues. They are looking for a way to come out of poverty. They are looking for a way to be able to stand on their own feet and to help their family to come up out of the poverty line. So the model, therefore, is absolutely scalable. As I mentioned to you, both in Bangladesh, Grameen has about 8 million clients, and here through our partners, and I chair the microfinance network, as I mentioned, we have 52 million clients. So the fact that it's probably larger than most of the large banks gives you a sense that scale is not the problem. Neither is funding the problem. I think what is important is to say, how do we now take it to the next level? Because the microfinance model is built around groups and small ticket sizes. As these micro entrepreneurs improve or increase their business from one goat, one cow, one buffalo to 5 to 15 to 50, then how do we help them? What is the strategy to migrate and hand off? It's not about ego that they're my customers. I started them, so I'm going to bank them all my life. How do I now hand them over to the next bank who can give them from 10,000 rupees, which I used to give them, 1 lakh and then 10 lakhs as their business scales? What are the mentoring supports that they need? What are the capacity building that they need? What are the training that they need? How can they really plug into an ecosystem that supports this entrepreneurship model? And therefore, the need, as you said, for a policy offensive is absolutely critical. And I know there are lots of people who love the current government on this call, would not sort of look at political overtones or undertones, but the fact that we need to be able to say, if we are looking at a mudra loan or if we are looking at a guarantee facility, then how do we really unlock it for the poorest of the poor and not recount what is already done just because they fit within a segment? So the ability to look at, as you mentioned, I like the word, the policy offensive is absolutely critical if we are committed to this. And even if, we want to give ourselves a long shot at taking on China, people like Taiwan and Vietnam and Indonesia are taking over some of the people are moving out of China. For us, that is a wake-up call. We need to create, the whole ecosystem that moves backward into the small and medium enterprises that support that. So we need to create a policy framework, hopefully offensive enough and aggressive enough that builds out the bench strength for us to be able to scale.
Thank you so much, Royston.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anshuman. Great question. Quick time check, people. It's 5:05. I have requested my panelists to give me 10, 15 more minutes, depending on how much time they have. I cannot bribe them with beer because these are only two panelists I've had who don't drink. So I don't know how to deal bribe them otherwise. I promise to
You can try Mishti Dohi.
Mishti Doi, all right. I think you owe me. Rather than me the other way. You have the greatest question I have right now. Coming from,
I have a hard stop at 5:15, but other than that, I'm good till 5:15.
5:15 is fine. So thank you so much. So I have a couple of more questions. I want to have Shipra Meda, who's from Tesco. Shipra, you're here. I'm going to allow you to talk. Please ask the question, but please ask one of the panelists because I don't think we have time for both.
All right. Thanks, Anirban. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
Okay. Though this question was for both, I'll ask Mekin. So my questions, you see real and big issues surrounding the system, and really all your efforts, both of you, are clearly towards making this a better world. Now, these are very testing times, and the impact really would be deep, would be very long-term. How do you motivate yourself and the team around to continue to support these endeavors?
Okay, I know Shipra well from she works with Tesco, and these are the kind of questions she's dealing with at Tesco pretty much every day, right, Shipra?
Yes, pretty much.
Question to ask.
So Shipra, honestly, a tough one to answer because Royston used a phrase which applies to me. It's part of my Twitter bio, which is an eternal optimist. So I haven't had that problem. I haven't had to motivate myself. I actually find motivation in human action, and I see enough motivation in human action. I'll give you one quick example. With COVID, there were 5 of us entrepreneurs chatting, created a small WhatsApp group, which then snowballed into a 1,500 people Telegram group. That group's called Startup versus COVID. There are many large-scale initiatives that have come about from there, from volunteers who had not known each other, have never met each other because of the lockdown, but now are supporting 17 states in running their helpline centers with 7,000 volunteer doctors doing calls for free. So, like, I think it's basically what you choose to look at. I feel that choice lies with you, and helping you decide what to look at. My own team at Udhyam for the first 2 weeks post the lockdown did go through, like, because our Vyaparis were just unwilling to talk about anything except for food on the table. And we were working on the food for like getting food on the table. Post which I feel it took some time, but getting people to think about just next step, right? Very often we get stuck with, the world is such a bad place or so difficult. Like these problems of education, of livelihood, of poverty are such large problems and the scale is so huge. How will I as one person do anything about it ever? And it is basically that first step, right? That what is the first step that you can take, or what is the next step that you can take? And things will emerge. And I know this almost sounds like Gyan. This is stuff that people use as quotes, etc. But that's about it. So all I was doing with my team was, what can you do today, right? We started having a daily stand-up. Well, we still sat on our Zoom calls, but where we would just discuss what is it that we can do today, and let's make our best effort to today. That's all we know. We don't know tomorrow. We don't know a week later. But today, what can we do? I think that was enough. In a week's time, the team was back at higher energy levels than we had been pre-COVID.
Wow.
Yeah, that's great to hear. Thank you, Shipra. Thank you, Mekin. Thank you so much. Incidentally, just to say that, I mean, we never did a virtual training in our lives before Corona. And we are clocking some 100 batches a month now. And I have no idea what is happening around us. So it's all thanks to my team. I think they are the young ones. I'm just too old and great. And I'm still kind of shell-shocked. But thank you for saying that, Mekin. I think one of my earlier panelists also, Joy Bhattacharya, had spoken about pretty much chunking it down to 1 or 2 days at a time and figuring out what you want to do. Lovely. I have one more question, and I think this one is coming from Nritya Madhuppa, who heads Coworks Foundry. Nritya, are you here?
Yeah, I'm here.
So Nritya, again, you have a question for both, but in the interest of time, I think you will have to choose one of the two.
Yeah, I'll go with this to Royston. So again, this is for both of you, but you know, I would love to hear from you. It's been a great session, by the way. Learned an enormous amount, leaving very, very inspired. I want to go straight to the bottom of it. I see a lot of entrepreneurs with the heart in the right place and sort of dramatically altering the fates of the people at the base of the pyramid, right? They're building all of these incredible companies. However, it happens in a very contained space. I'm sort of melding both of the questions raised before, which is about sort of motivation and scale, but talking about the entrepreneur right now. Like, how do you alter the mindsets of social entrepreneurs to think scale, right? When you see impact, it's a very, very difficult space to be in, period. Now, how do you alter the mindsets of entrepreneurs? How do you reset the ecosystem to support the scale of such sort of proven solutions? You know, you've done this yourselves in your organizations. I want to know how you advise other people to start thinking that. And I think a lot of your private sector experience informs the way you think about scale and mindsets around this. So yeah, over to you.
Thank you, Nitya. I'm going to take a stab first, and then I'll hand over to Mekin, and I'll duck out. But you know, what you said is absolutely critical in terms of being able to create a path and show that path forward, which is why I'm still recalling a session I did in Luxembourg when we were talking at I was presenting at the Global Sustainability Finance Forum. And I said that unless we create the whole ecosystem right up from the debt, the equities, the investment banking, and then the social stock exchange. And they said, you know, what are you talking about? And then that's where I talked about social stock exchange, and they sort of fed back in. Then Madam Sitaraman sort of talked about it then, and then we are working with her in designing it. We had the last review with SEBI last week on how that's going to look. So nothing succeeds like success. So if we are able to showcase social entrepreneurs who've been able to build scale, who've been able to have great social impact, whether you talk about Narayan Hrudayalaya, whether you talk about, you know, food systems or healthcare solutions or technology or financial inclusion, if we are able to really bring those into the mainstream and create a completely new aspirational entrepreneur who's not interested, you know, in raising in 10 days tens of billions of dollars, and that's not the only goal, but has a very clear double bottom line or a triple bottom line metric that showcases how they can be part of that mix. And then alongside, you put in, and again to the earlier point of policies and, you know, how do we bring in the right policies? How do we create, you know, a new CSR dimension where that can be pulled in as equity into these companies, rather than CSR being given as donations they can also be given an option to invest in social enterprises. And that's again how scale comes in. So it's ability to create the right funnels or the right pipes for liquidity to flow, the right ecosystem. And I do believe that the social stock exchange is one critical element that if we can pull it off, and if we pull in, because today everyone's talking different things. RBI has its own list of priority sector. SEBI has its own list of social venture capital fund. Ministry of Corporate Affairs has its own list of CSR. It's bizarre. And the world has its own list of 17 SDGs. We need to throw out all of these and have one common definition, and everyone's then funding the same set of social entrepreneurs, or at least the same segments of social entrepreneurship, so that you have really putting your whole muscle behind that and giving it the right momentum. So that's my piece. And here I'm also going to say thank you to everyone, because I need to be on another call at 5:15.
You have one more minute. I'm not letting you go so early. Just last question from Rohan Nabar. Rohan, quickly. Thank you, Nritya. Starting with Royston.
Hi. So, you know, wonderful session. Quick question. What would be your advice, given this particular context today, to the batch of 2020? People passing out this year.
I think the focus is look at what are the opportunities opening up. Yesterday in a call with NSDC, we heard that there are 5 sectors: logistics, facility management, healthcare, edutech or edtech, and online entertainment. These are the 5 that are likely to be significantly scaling up in the near term. So don't go by just what you've always thought you should have done, the plan that you always had. but read the signs of the times, read the tea leaves and say, is there an opportunity here that my skill set can fit in? Look at Ikigai, look at, the Bible. He talked about, the Bhagavad Gita. Find inspiration beyond your textbooks and see what is the gift that I've been given that can make money, that the world needs, that can really change the way I meet my purpose in the world. That's philosophical enough to end that.
Thank you, Royston. I will let you go, but Mekin, thank you, Royston. I know you got
thank you.
pleasure having me. Can't tell you how thankful I am. We'll catch up soon.
Thanks, Royston. Good meeting you.
Mekin, your inputs, and then we will wrap.
Yeah. I think I'll pick one thing that Royston said and expand on it, which is to not trust others in terms of, hey, what they tell you what to do, figure it out yourself. Now is a great time when, in some sense, people will stop telling you. Like, otherwise, we have this problem where everyone knows what you should be doing, except that they have not done it all their life, right? So this is a great time to really be thinking for yourself what you might be doing, reading the tea leaves, observing what's happening around the world, drawing your own conclusions, talking to more people, trying to make sense of the world, and then deciding would be my advice, right? So this is a great time to not go by playbooks.
Thank you so much. I think one thing that I'm taking out of this is that upend everything and don't play by playbooks. And one thing I need to learn is to read tea leaves. Thank you. That is the new skill that I need to develop. Thank you, both of you, for saying that. Thank you, Rohan. We are out of time today, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you again for dropping by on Friday evening. Can't tell you how pleasurable this has been, or this is becoming. It's becoming a lovely habit every Friday. And I particularly thank all my attendees, my audience, for coming. We are back again next Friday with another lovely panel. We have Ram Kumar, who's the MD of VMware, who joins Manish Sharma, who's the country head for GitHub, talking about open source technologies, new age technologies, and disruption in that space. So thank you very much. Mekin's email and Twitter handles are on the chat, so please note that down. I will see you guys next week. Mekin, it's been a pleasure always. I don't know how you managed to do this, pack so much in a single day. I really need to sit with you and learn so much. And
you're very kind, Anirban. I think Udhyam owes a lot of our language to you. And thank you so much for having taught us the core of customer centricity and experimentation.
You're being too kind. You're taking it forward like a beacon. So thank you, and keep doing it. I think, as someone said, just keep at it. So all the best, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Have a great evening, great weekend ahead. Thank you so much, others, for joining. I'll see you next time. All the best. Have a great weekend ahead.